Hey, this is Kari at Studio R12 Stencils, and we know that adding plaid to your projects can add some pop and add some color, but it can also be tedious. However, it doesn't have to be. Today we're going to show you 3 different ways to paint plaid using stencils. We have watched countless videos of people trying to paint plaid by hand using an entire roll of tape, and oh, it's so painful. So we want to make sure that you know that you can use stencils to paint easy and quick plaid that will make your projects look amazing. So the first one we are starting with is buffalo plaid. Buffalo plaid is our best selling stencil. We have 6,000 titles on our website, studior12.com. But buffalo plaid takes the cake year after year. There are many ways that you can do this. Let me show you some examples. So you can do buffalo plaid all over your project with either really pops of colors, or you can do it tone on tone, or you can choose to do it in different areas. So on this season's greeting sign, we did the buffalo plaid on the bottom, added the little bit of greenery to the top, so it just has a nice Christmas feel, but only on part of it. A lot of people think of buffalo plaid at Christmas time, but you can also use it for every day. We also have this really awesome lemon design. We put buffalo plaid at the top and the bottom. And we also used it on this lemon sign and used it as a border. So there are a ton of options. We have a playlist showing you different ways to use buffalo plaid, and you'll definitely want to check it out. So first things first is picking the size of buffalo plaid that you want. Our stencils are washable, they're reusable. We have a video for that. So you can use them on project after project. Cool thing about our website is that we offer stencils in several different sizes. So this is a 9x9 buffalo plaid, and today we'll be using a 12x12. The design grows or shrinks depending on the size of the stencil. So depending on how big or small you want your buffalo plaid is going to determine the size you get, but you're also going to want to keep in mind that if you want to cover an entire 12x12 surface with buffalo plaid, you might want to get a bigger size so that you don't have to do the repeating. You can see the full size of our stencils as well as the design or artwork size of our stencils in the listings on studior12.com. So today we are using a 12x12 buffalo plaid stencil on a 12x12 board. We have already base coated the surface. There's a couple YouTube shorts giving you tips on how to base coat surfaces. Now, we will definitely want to use tape when doing plaid stencils. There are a lot of lines, a lot of little nooks and crannies. So I have this taped on both edges, and then I also taped it here on the top just to hold it down extra. I'll also be using my hand for this. So let's get into some stencil basics. We did white background, which is the Studio R1227, and the black for our buffalo plaid, so you can see a nice pop. That's the Studio R1228. We will share our paint color guide below. And we're also using scrap mylar. It's the best palette paper ever, because just like our stencils, you can rewash it. So we have paint on our dome brush. We're gonna come over to our paper towel and offload. The offloading is the most important part because it helps you get some of that extra goopy paint off there so you're not bleeding under your stencils. If you're bleeding under, you'll want to make sure you're offloading. Then we're going to come to our project and we are going to start swirling. So I'm going to show you a couple different techniques as we go through our buffalo plaid so that you can see how quick and easy this is. I'm getting a whole row without even having to add more paint to our project or to our brush. Actually, I'm going to keep stenciling until I run out so we can see how much we get. I'm going to show you how to swirl, which is what we are doing now, just going in a nice swirling motion with our dome brush. If you haven't tried a dome brush, we highly, highly, highly recommend that because of the cut of the dome and the shape of the brush. It kind of helps prevent some bleeding under because only a portion of the brush is actually touching your project. A lot of stencilers use flat brushes and they tend to splay under. So let's take a look real quick at what one of our layers looks like with the swirling. So there we go. We have one layer. It's just nice and dusty. And this is really cool because then you can do, if you want to paint words over top of it or however you want to use it, you can determine how light or how bold your buffalo plaid is going to be. So I'm going to go over and start again at the top and show you a different technique. We're going to get our paint again, come to our paper towel and offload. Now we're coming into our stippling motion, which is a tapping. So a lot of times when people do plaid, especially if you're doing small plaid, they will do the tapping motion because it covers more ground a lot quicker. You will notice that I did already have to get more paint on my brush because we are using a lot more paint because we're using a lot more pressure. So you will have to put more paint on your brush more often if you are doing the stippling versus the swirling. All right, so I did this half with the stipple, and let's do a second layer of swirling on this half to show you the difference in how much quicker it covers when you stipple versus swirl. You will want to, reiterating again, hold down this stencil whenever you're getting into the part of the plaid that has a lot of the little lines, because those can move, which is also a good reason to do the stippling, because when you're stippling, you're pushing down rather than if you are swirling. We did a really good job of bridging these stencils so that it has minimal movement, but if you're using too much pressure, you could definitely pull those up when you are doing your swirling. So let's pull this off, and we are going to pull it back, and you can see the difference here in the layer of swirling versus with the extra layer on top of stippling, and then 2 layers of swirling. So this did get a little bit more coverage, a little bit quicker, but how easy and quick is that for painting buffalo plaid for your projects? Okay, so now we're going to get into the inspiration which led us to doing this video. We were looking for some Valentine's Day projects to get a little inspiration of what we could paint for ourselves, and I found the most pretty pink and red plaid, and then realized we had the stencils that we could make it. So this stencil comes with 2 pieces. So you could use it for stripes, or you can put it together and then make a plaid stencil with it. So that's what we're going to do today. And in this part, so we just did the white and black on the first one. But on this one, we are going to show you how you can do multiple colors with your plaid. So then you might not even stencil or paint over it. It could just become a plaid project to add a little bit of pop to the Valentine's Day or any other decoration that you have. So with this one, we did color 53 for our background, and then we're going to do 48 for our first layer, and then 45 for our top layer of our plaid. So we have a nice little pink project coming up. So you will want to make sure that if you are using a paint color that you don't use very often, move this over here so you can see, that you are shaking it up. So I shook it a little, but not a lot. And you can see there's a lot of clear in this paint. So we probably haven't used this one since last Valentine's Day. So we will shake it up real good, come back over here. We get our paint from Sherwin-Williams, and we paint a lot, so we buy in bulk, and then we put it in the little honey jars, which I'll share a link below that you can get off Amazon. You will want to, if you are using the honey jars, not fill them up all the way, because then that gives you room to do your shaking. So here we're gonna get our pink, we unloaded, and then we are going to offload and then come and swirl. And I am swirling with this because of the lines. It's easy to go all the way across. You could even come this way and kind of color with it if you wish, whatever you feel that works best. If you are gonna swirl, just like we talked about with the other lines, you will probably wanna hold it down a little so that your lines don't move, especially because these lines are the entire length of our project. So we'll go all the way through here. So I do have a quick tip for you. If you decide that you would want to do a line all the way across and you wouldn't want it to stop where the border is, you are going to actually start in the middle of your project and then not go all the way over to the end of the design. So I'm gonna leave this one a little bit open, and then once I get the rest of my layers done, then I'm gonna show you how to finish off those. Okay, so now we have our 2 layers done of our first layer of our plaid. So we'll pull this off and you can see it's starting to get a little bit pink, nice and bold. So how do we finish this? If you want to take your project all the way to the end without having the lines, you will not go all the way to the edge. If you go all the way to the edge, see how bold these lines are at the edge where the stencil was? If you try to do this and then move it over and go over it, you're gonna have a really hard time making that look even and a nice fade together. So what we decided to do then was just to let that fade out toward the edge. We will replace our stencil here, and I'm just going to move it down a little bit and let this one hang off the edge. We would recommend retaping it. Come into your paint, and then you can start over. You can either stipple or you can swirl, and you'll probably want to have this off the edge a little, so I'm here over just off the edge. And there you go. And look, now your line goes all the way to the edge. It's nice and even all along the way. So we're going to go into our second color. Before you add another layer of stencil to your project, you will want to make sure that what you have already painted is nice and dry. Grab your hair dryer, make sure if it looks wet or it feels cold to the touch, that means you need to go ahead and dry it. One of our best friends with painting any kind of plaid is going to be the sanding block. There are a couple little areas here that I had a little too much paint, and there are some ridges. So I'll just sand right over those, knock them down. You can do it either between layers or you can do it after you are done and have everything, but it really pulls it back a little bit. You can also check out some of our videos on how to fix mistakes, which will show you how to clean up some edges if you do happen to get too much paint. So now we're going to place our other stencil here and start in with our bright, bold color, making sure we shake it because I'm almost certain we have not used this one in a while. I am going to use the same brush that I already used for my light pink. Just in case you don't have a lot of brushes, you can reuse your brush if you are going to stay in the same color family. If you use your brush, I'm gonna get some extra out of here, and then wash it, one of our biggest recommendations is making sure that it is all the way dry before you start again. Because if it's not dry, the water is going to get in there, the water is going to water down your paint, and then you are going to increase your chances of bleeding under. So now we're coming through and we're just doing the opposite of what we did last time. The last time our lines went horizontal, now we're going vertical. I am stippling this time instead of swirling because we do already have a layer underneath, so we are covering a light layer and a darker layer, and the stippling will help cover that quicker. You can most certainly swirl. Stenciling is a layers game. It does take patience, and that's where a lot of people run into the bleeding under, because they want to go fast, they want to get it done, and then they find themselves with a mess. Okay, so since we did multiple colors, multiple layers, this one did take a little bit longer and a little bit more muscle power with our stippling to cover over the layers, but I didn't complete it all because I wanted to show you a couple different things. So these two lines here, we did with 2 layers of the dark pink number 45 with the stippling motion. So those are pretty bold. Now, with the rest of it, we just did 1 layer of the stipple motion. So depending on how you want your project to be, if you are going to be looking for some self-shading, or if you are going to be stenciling over top of this, you may decide just to do dusty layers so that your project pops off of it once you get your stenciling done. But if you are just looking for a little piece, a pop of color to add with your other decorations, then maybe bold is how you want to go. So now we're ready to go to our third and final plaid stencil that we are showing off for you today. And this one just comes as a 1 piece. So when we first dug into this one, we were like, well, how does this become plaid if it's just stripes? Let me show you. So when you use the stencil, you will put it down one way, paint your stripes, and then flip the stencil over, so then it becomes plaid. We did it with this Hello Fall project, and what we love about this is it adds in the self-shading. So with our stencils at StudioR12.com, we have a tiny etch on the bottom of the stencil that tells you what the skew is, but this is also really great for putting down your stencil, making sure that you have it the correct way or the way that you want to remember that you had it. So once again, we're going to tape off our edges, make sure that our stencil is actually in the right place for our board. Since our stencil and our board are the same size, it makes it easy to make sure that it's in the right area. And then tape off the top, tape off the bottom. So for the background of this project, we used a 50, and then for the plaid portion, we are going to use 49. So we did tone on tone with this. We showed you the bold with the black and white. We showed you the different layers of pink. So for this one, we're going to do the blue to show you tone on tone. With this stencil, for the with the fall plaid is what it's called, you will definitely be using this as a background for something to stencil over. And we also recommend with this one that you do light, dusty layers so that you do get to see the self-shading. So if you do it really dark like we did with that second layer of pink, the self-shading kind of goes away. I am holding these big lines down. We call these finger traps or arm traps. You can stick your arm all the way through it. But to get some of these really cool designs, it is inevitable that we have some big areas and spaces. Once you get into those, you can just kind of color around like with your crayon. Go into your edges. We are still offloading Stencil Basics every single time. Getting our paint on our brush, offloading, and then coming over and doing a light swirl, not really applying much pressure to the project. Okay, so that was quick and easy for our first layer. We will take off the tape, pull it back and let you see. So there we have a little layer of our blue plaid, which just looks like stripes right now. So then we are going to just turn it, and you can see here the plaid starts to show up. So we'll come into our blue again, the number 49. You will have to make sure that the paint is dry before you turn that stencil. Otherwise, you could get paint underneath the stencil, which is going to drag it along. The beauty of doing the swirling is that since we are offloading before we bring the paint to our project, we are having those really light, dusty layers, which means, I'm gonna turn this because I like doing it better this way. So since we have the light dusty layers, depending on the size of your project, when you get to the finish of your first layer, oftentimes the beginning is dry, so you can start over. We don't typically do a lot of blow drying when we are stenciling, unless the project's really small, because our layers are so light and dusty that they dry themselves. We'll dry the base coats and the backgrounds, but we don't do a lot of drying on the stenciling portion. Okay, so let's peel this off, take off the tape. The grand reveal is always the best. I'm going to pull the stencil back, throw it over here in our pile, and take a look at how cool that turned out. It's just a little bit of self-shading. This would be really pretty in a bedroom, add a nice little saying here, put it in your bathroom. You can see that with this one, I might have actually popped off of that and not finished it all the way because it looks like, it looks a little dusty there. But with the self-shading, it's just really pretty dusty layers. You can go into your sanding block after you are done. Make it nice and smooth. You can do it really rough and add a really rustic touch to it, or you can just peel it back a little bit with a really light grit sandpaper so that you can just make it nice and smooth. Today we showed you 3 of the easiest ways to paint plaid using stencils. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload new videos about tips, tricks, and techniques. And don't forget to check us out live every Tuesday where we answer your questions about crafting, painting, DIY, and stencils.